Folks, welcome to Comm160 Intro to Performance Studies. My name is Ben Clancy, and I'm going to be your instructor for this semester. I'm excited to work with you over the course of our next intense month of investigating performance. Our objectives today are for me to introduce myself a little bit, for us to talk about the syllabus, especially the online format, and to talk over your first assignment description. So today is just basically a logistics, your typical syllabus day for a class, and next time we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what is performance, and we'll talk about our first two readings, which you'll find already posted under resources on Sakai. So let's begin then, just very briefly. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So like I said, my name's Ben, and you can call me Ben in all of our correspondences and everything. I'm about to be a fifth-year PhD student here at UNC in the Department of Communication, and my focus is primarily on rhetoric and technology studies, but I've also taken many performance studies classes during my time at UNC. I also have a background in creative writing, particularly poetry writing, and I perform as a musician in my own sort of spare time. So I'm really interested and actively engaged in a lot of aspects of performance and creation, especially through creative writing on top of my academic sort of work. So that is going to be the main perspective that I'm going to be bringing to our discussions, is not only my education in performance studies, but my perspective as a musician and a poet, and the way that I view creation as something that is fundamentally both intellectual and political, which is the way we're going to be talking about performance studies all semester. I also have a master's from Texas State University in communication studies, and my undergrad degree is in English and philosophy from Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. So I'm from Texas and grew up there primarily in Austin, and then I went to school in San Antonio and San Marcos, and I've spent a long time studying communication, but also studying English and philosophy, which are all important elements of studying performance studies. So I'm really looking forward to bringing sort of my diverse background in these things to the table during our summer session, and hopefully benefiting from your independent experiences as well. This is a class that is meant to be collaborative, and we're going to try our very hardest to make it as collaborative as possible, while also making sure that we are respecting the fact that everybody is going through a unique time at the moment, and people have different resources and abilities at the moment to communicate digitally, to meet as regularly as we might otherwise. So it's sort of a natural transition to talking about our course format, but just really quickly, I always like to say that I'm also a person, and you'll see a little bit more of my house and stuff than you ordinarily would during these lectures. So I live with my partner Kelly, who's a visual artist, and we're in her studio, our combined studio right now. So that's what all of the stuff behind me is. I also have a cat named Toyin, who you probably briefly saw earlier bouncing around in the background. She'll probably join us sometimes. I also have a dog named Frankie and a new little puppy named June. So we'll keep them mostly out of the videos. But yeah, so, and like I said, I also do creative work. I'm really invested in music, and especially music as a way as a vehicle for creative writing. So I do a lot of that in my own personal time on top of my own research, which primarily deals with the relationship that exists between technology and democracy. So that's me. I know that that was maybe more detail or less detail than you would have liked, but I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you more personally over the course of our compressed summer session. So Let's move on then to talk about the syllabus, especially to talk about the online format of the class. So if you pull up your syllabus, this is going to be the first main section after the general description of what the course is. And so between the general description of what the course is in the first paragraph of the online section of the syllabus, I do want to emphasize that this is going to be a unique format and a perhaps challenging format for us to have a performance studies class because performance is fundamentally invested in things that are embodied in the body as a site of knowledge, in how movement and collaboration and participation can be both sites of expression and sites of intellectual inquiry. And because of this, transitioning performance studies to online will feel sort of awkward sometimes, and it won't be exactly the same as this would be in person. And that's something that we're going to have to roll with. How I want us to try to view it is as a constraint that we can use productively. So, commonly in artistic practice, people will use constraints as a way to encourage themselves to sort of think outside of the box or be more creative. So, for instance, Brian Eno is a pretty famous musician. He was one of the first people who innovated ambient music, but he has been working for forever. And one of the tools that he used to use is he had a deck of cards with prompts that musicians would have to follow wherever they drew these random prompts, and they would use that as a constraint to make music from. And so, from that sort of perspective, I want us to try to view the digital format as something that we can use innovatively. I know that many of you may not have access to sophisticated recording equipment. I certainly do not have access to sophisticated recording equipment. I will try to never ask you to do things that will be beyond your technical means or require you to learn how to use a new program or anything like that, although I can help you use iMovie if that is something that you have access to. I have some experience using that. That's what I'm using to record these lectures. But otherwise, what we want to try to do, I think, is in our performances, whether we're recording them on video or whether we're recording them through audio, we just want to challenge yourselves to be creative, to say, I may not know how to use this exactly right, but I'm going to use it to the best of my ability and try to do it in a way that is aesthetically interesting, that is experimental in nature, that I think helps express my point. Whenever you feel like you're facing logistical problems, try to come up with creative solutions. But I, of course, am always going to be here to help you through that. And in circumstances in which you are having real technical difficulties that are getting in your way, or where you may not have access to things that you feel like you need to be successful, please contact me. We should be in dialogue as to whether any of this gets to be sort of too much. But all of that being said, let's talk a little bit more concretely about how the online sessions will work. As you probably sort of know, because you are listening to a lecture every day that we meet, which is Monday through Thursday. We're scheduled from 3 to 5 p.m. I will post video lectures, which will be, I think, in the form of YouTube links. I'll keep you posted on that, but I'm pretty sure that that's how it'll work 95% of the time at least. Sometimes I might record audio lectures instead of video lectures, but in most circumstances we'll do video and I'll post it in the form of a YouTube link that should automatically generate closed captions, so you can also follow what I'm saying in a written format if that is helpful for you. So every time we meet, then I will post this video lecture. And in those lectures, I'll either be covering, usually some combination of covering our readings and the content for that day, and also talking through our assignment logistics and what is expected from you, and giving you oral feedback, for instance, on questions from your forums posts and things like that. I will be recording then a lot of video lectures, and I do expect that you watch all of them. I know that sometimes they might be a little bit awkward, or that I might be looking at my notes while I'm talking to y'all and trying to make eye contact at the same time, but bear with me. We're all trying to adapt to the new format together, and hopefully this will be better than just listening to my voice and not having much face-to-face interaction whatsoever. I also think that this will 100% be better than Zoom for class meeting, and we're especially not doing Zoom for class meeting because I want to respect the fact that right now people are in extraordinary circumstances, so having flexibility in terms of when you watch the lectures might be helpful for people. But I do expect, again, that you do watch all of the lectures, because this is where we will be discussing content, and also where I will be giving you details on assignments and keeping you updated about things in class. So just make sure that you are really watching these and taking them as seriously as you would attending a class session. So the next thing that we should talk about is our forums posts and our FAQ posts. So these are two of the other ways in which we're going to try to replicate the experience of being in a classroom, even though we are not in a classroom. So for every week that you are in class, you will write two posts. You will write a substantive forums post, which there are explicit instructions on in the syllabus that I would encourage you to review. And then you will write a frequently asked question or a question post, in which you're just simply asking a question about something that you do not understand from the week's reading or need clarification on, or anything like that. So they're not discussion questions as you might have done them in other classes. They are literally, what don't you get still? Or what are you having trouble with, or what could you need clarification on, or could you use clarification on from the week's material? Those are the frequently asked questions. The forums posts are your more intensive, argumentative responses to the week's reading, where you are working out a problem or discussing a theme that we have been covering during our class periods, and those are more extended written compositions. So in that circumstance then, or the idea here is that those are going to be your main contributions to our class discussion of the week, as your forums posts, and then your FAQ posts are opportunities for you to engage in dialogue with me, where I will respond to your FAQ posts personally every week to give you clarification on things that you are missing. In terms of the forums posts, I'm also going to ask that every week you write a response to at least two of your peers to the forums posts that they have written. And that's 2 to 3 sentences of you saying, I think that this is interesting and or insightful for this reason, or here is a counterpoint, or have you thought about this example of what you're talking about as a supplement to your discussion. Any sorts of those modes of constructive dialogue are fine. The idea being, though, that you are interacting with your peers in written form, even though you won't get the opportunity to interact with them in person as much as we would like over the course of the summer. So that is the idea behind the FAQ and the forums posts. In a moment, I'll go down to the forums section on the syllabus, and we'll talk in detail about what is required from your forums. But until then, I just wanted to say that this is the idea behind our forums and FAQ discussions, is to take the place of our classroom discussions. So hopefully you'll find that valuable, and I really do want you to be actively participating in those forums posts with your peers and engaging in a high quality discussion if possible, because it's going to be our one real avenue for back and forth interaction, at least until further into the semester. Um, Cool. So that's forums and FAQs, and also the lecture format. The last thing that we should talk about in terms of the online format is workshops. So every time that you have a performance, except for your first performance, I've blocked off a class period where we have a workshop day. The idea is that the weeks in which we have workshops, you are expected to set up an appointment with me to meet either during that scheduled workshop day, so from 3 to 5 on the day that the workshop is scheduled, or if you can't do that, or would prefer to meet during my office hours that week, you can make an appointment during my office hours that week instead. And we will discuss what you're working on and your plans for your performance, and I'll address any questions that you have, and we'll have the opportunity for face-to-face correspondence over your piece. So we'll block out like 15-minute increments for us to meet and talk about these things. So that's what to expect from the workshop day. So I hope that together these things start to add up to something resembling an in-person experience, where you'll be seeing my face during lecture almost every day. We'll be corresponding in writing weekly, and then we'll have the opportunity between performances to meet and discuss things via Zoom. And of course, also every week I have office hours, so if you have any questions or want to talk to me about anything, please feel free to make an appointment with me. So my office hours are from 2 to 3 on Wednesdays and Thursdays, or by appointment. And how meeting with me during office hours works, because I can't host a Zoom meeting for more than 40 minutes, you'll send me an email and I'll send you a Zoom link, and then we'll talk. So that is sort of the digital plan. The last thing, I guess, in terms of that is your performances, which is because we obviously can't do those in person. For all of your performances, I'm going to give you the option of either submitting an audio file or a link to a video of you doing your performance. And we'll talk about the details of that in particular when we talk about your performance descriptions. But you will need to be able to record yourself in some way. I understand not all of you might be able to video capture yourself, but most of you, I think, based on your survey responses, could. So that's great. But you're also totally welcome to do audio recordings for all of your performances, but there will be specific details to discuss about how that'll work. And then for every performance, I'm also going to ask you to do peer feedback for 2 of your peers who performed. So we'll watch all of each other's videos every performance period, or listen to all of each other's audio files, and then you'll write substantive responses to 2 of your peers each time. And in that way, I hope to encourage, between forums and your actual performances, dialogue amongst y'all. I'm also going to give you the option of having a final group presentation that you would have to, might have some challenging logistics, but could also be really awesome later on in the semester. So I'm hoping to maximize the amount of group interaction and also maximize the amount of personal interaction we have, while keeping the format non-synchronous, while keeping flexibility at the maximum. So that is sort of our online plan. So let's move on then, just to talk about a few more small things in the syllabus. Let's talk through in a little bit more detail the expectations from the forums posts and the FAQs. So you will be responsible over the course of the semester for writing 5 total forums entries in response to the content and readings for the week. So these are due on dates that are marked on the syllabus. It is usually a Monday, but not always, because sometimes you'll have an exam or a performance on a Monday instead. So it is as close to the beginning of the week as I could get it without having that overlap with an exam. So that is when you should expect them to be due. that same week, you also have to post your 2 responses. I'm not going to be strict, but within a week of the first post going up, you need to be responding to your peers within that amount of time. And I will remind you to be responsive to your peers for the first couple of weeks at least. But it is really, really important that within a week of posting your own forum, you have responded to one of your peers. The second thing that we should talk about in terms of forums posts is exactly what you're supposed to do in them. So you'll see on the syllabus there's a specific guideline breakdown for your forums posts in which you're supposed to do a total of 4 things essentially. So you're supposed to post a key question or theme from the week that your post explores. That is, you should have a clear thesis or summary statement at the beginning of each one of your forums posts. It's like, this is what concept or this is what course theme I'm talking about this week. This is what argument I want to explore in relationship to that course theme, or this is what concept I'm interested in investigating from this week's readings, etc. Then the second thing that you're going to do is identify or quote at least 2 passages from the week's readings. So you want to make sure that you're choosing passages you find relevant and provocative and you think support the observations or arguments you're making in your post. You need to make sure you cite these properly. There is a description on proper citation protocol in the guideline breakdown, but if you're using MLA or APA, that is fine with me, just as long as you are using a citation format consistently in your writing responses that clearly identifies where your quotes come from. So you want to write 1 to 2 strong, which is usually 3 to 4 sentence paragraphs per post. Your discussion may bring into focus, as we say, a sticking point, a revelation, an insight, or a concern provoked by the reading. So explore and dig down into something that you found interesting or troubling or provocative from what we read that week. Make an argument about it of some kind or a number of observations about it. And then finally, you're meant to include a hyperlink to, that is just a link to a relevant performance example. So some video or audio file or meme or something that you think constitutes an example of performance that reflects what you're talking about, or it gives an example of what you're talking about in your forums post. And that last part's going to be really important. So don't blow that off or just randomly Google something in responding to it, because I will also, in the course of lectures, sometimes post things for you to watch as examples of what we're discussing. Posting something like this will be really, really helpful for us to get the multidimensional effect from the class that we really want to. So please do make sure you're following these guidelines closely and making sure you're including an example. So that's the idea behind the forums post. Those are the guidelines. And like I said, you'll post this around Monday every week. And then by the end of the week, you should have responded to at least 2 of your peers' forums posts. Excuse me. In addition to that, your FAQ posts are due each Thursday. So by the last day we meet each week, you're expected to post 1 question you had from the previous week's readings or lectures. I'm flexible about when you do this. You can do this at the beginning. You can wait until all the lectures are done for clarification and do this on Thursday. But in any case, by Thursday of each week, you should be posting 1 FAQ question, and I will respond to that in a written format, or if there are questions a lot of people have in common, I will also sometimes create a video response to all of those questions. But in any case, I will respond individually to your FAQ questions. So in terms of how this breaks down grade-wise, your forums posts are an independent category of your grade, and your responses to your peers and your FAQ posts come together to make up your participation grade. So if you scroll down a little bit in your syllabus, you'll see that the evaluation grade breakdown says that each one of your forums posts is worth 3 points per entry, and there are 5 entries, so this is a total of 15 points. I need to edit that, or 15% of your total grade. Then we'll have a midterm exam and a final exam. We'll talk about those in more detail when we get closer to them, but you can read the descriptions up above in the syllabus if you want to. That will be worth 15 and 20 points respectively, and total 35 points of your grade. Then in terms of performances, you'll see that your story performance, which is your introductory performance that's due on Friday, is worth 5 points. Your spoken word performance is worth 10 points. Your multi-text performance is also worth 10 points, and we'll talk about what these mean, obviously, when we get there. And your final participatory performance is worth 15 points to 40 points total. So the largest portion of your grade is your performances. And then finally, your last category is participation. So each one of your substantive responses to your peers' forums posts is worth 1 point. And that is to say, rather, that you doing 2 a week is worth 1 point each for 5 points total. So you need to be responding to 2 peers a week. And that's clearly stated throughout the syllabus. So that's worth 5% of your total grade. And then your FAQ points are also worth 5% of your total grade, for participation being 10% of your total grade. And you can see the standard point breakdown below that. So that is our general sort of ambition for the semester, is that those are going to be the main responsibilities you have, is to create these 4 performances and then to do a midterm and a final exam that are very much based on the performances that you and your peers participate in. And then the final part of your grade will come in your participation in forums and your participation grade in general. So that's our grade breakdown. So really quickly then, if you look down to the course schedule, you'll see that first of all, just a reminder that we don't have a textbook for this course, that everything is posted under resources on Sakai, so that's where you'll look for things. So for instance, for tomorrow, June 23rd, we're going to be reading Richard Setchner's chapter on performing from the textbook that I didn't make you buy, which you'll find on resources on Sakai, and then Conquer Good's essay, Poetics, Play, Process, Power. So that is the expectation for you to have read by 3 p.m. tomorrow, ideally before our lecture, and that is what I will cover in lecture tomorrow. Looking ahead, you'll see that on Thursday, June 25th, you will have your first performance due, which is the story performance. So you will need to, by 3 p.m. that day, upload your first performance to a assignment folder, or a forums folder rather, that I'll create. We'll do most things through forums because you'll have to post your performances to forums for your peers to be able to review them. But in any case, that's where you'll post your story performances, is to forums, and you will listen to, during your course period, the performances of your peers, and they will listen to your performance or watch your performance if you do a video or an audio recording. Again, that is up to you. So I'm going to pause really quick here, and we're going to transition to talking about talking about the assignment instructions for your first performance. But that is the basic rundown of your syllabus. If you have any questions about anything we discussed, please feel free to email me, or feel free to post an FAQ about the syllabus, I suppose. I hope that, again, that this way of adapting this course to an online format is productive for us, but I also want to make sure that we're being as flexible as possible. So please always reach out to me if you have problems or needs that you feel like need to be addressed more than they are currently being addressed, and we will do our best to adapt to that. Cool. So just 1 second, and then we'll talk about your assignment description. Okay, folks, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about today was your first assignment description. So you'll find these posted under resources on Sakai underneath the folder that says assignment descriptions. These will be posted by the time you listen to this lecture today. So I wanted to say really quick though, before we got to this, I didn't mention that in terms of our class lectures, I will also be posting a Google document with the notes that I use to deliver our class lectures, or with an outline of those notes, so that you have resources to follow along with. And when we do our class lectures, that's also where I'll post things like links to relevant performances for you to watch and things like that. So I just wanted to clarify that. That's what we'll do in lieu of PowerPoints. I find that PowerPoints can be hard to follow along with while you're trying to do a video lecture too, because you're watching one visual thing and then you're doing another visual thing. So we'll do this Google Doc outline at least to start with, and hopefully that'll be productive. So anyway, getting then to your first assignment description. Like I said, this is due on Friday, so this will be your first performance. This class is about performing, so the majority of what we're going to do in the class work-wise is talk about and workshop your own performances as ways of exploring particular themes that are important to performance studies over the course of the semester. So that is something that I want us to think about in terms of performance studies for the rest of the semester, is that we can think about Intro to Performance as an introduction to performance studies, and then also as an introduction to performing as an act, because performance studies really is about both studying performance critically, but also studying aspects of social and political life and aspects of history or of culture through performance, using performance as an investigative tool. So that is the main spirit in which I want you to engage with performing over the course of the semester. Is in part, of course, performance is about the aesthetics and the writing and the choreography and making something look good and provocative. But performance studies, and the way that performance studies views the act of performing more particularly, is really focused on the idea that this is about communicating or investigating. It's about discovering new meanings through performing, or new kinds of knowledge through performance. And so that's the way that I want you to think about the performances that you're writing over the course of the semester. And so that might be a grand build-up to talk about our first performance, because it is a performance in which you're simply going to share a 2 to 3 minute story from your own life. But I want you to think about it in terms of this question. How, through the performing of this narrative, are you exploring an idea? Are you coming to know something? Are you communicating something about you or about the world to your audience? So that's how I want you to envision this first performance. So if you look at your handout, you'll see that the first column, or the first paragraph of the handout, is the catalyst. And this is going to be on every one of your performance sheets. And that means the provocation, the inspiration. What is it that you are going to be responding to in creating your performance? So what we're going to ask for your first performance is that you're going to share a 2 to 3 minute story about a significant moment of performance in your life, a moment in your life in which you were performing. And I want you to take this loosely. This could be a moment in which you were performing on stage, sure, but it could also be a moment in which you were performing in a classroom, or on a field, or at a place of worship, or at a public event, or with your family, or with your peers. You can think of it both on the formal level of saying, I was once in jazz band and performed, or was once in theater and performed. But you could also think about it on the more everyday metaphorical level. I once performed this identity to please my parents. So take it broadly, because that is how we're going to be characterizing performance all semester, is that it's going to be something that sometimes we see on the stage, but more often, perhaps, we see in everyday life, on the street, in our relationships, in our interactions with others. So All of that being said, you're going to pick this moment, this narrative about a moment in which you were performing, and you're going to carefully prepare the telling of the story into a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end, in which there are key moments that you want to emphasize and scenes that happen in the story that you're going to render in descriptive language. That is, you're going to describe vividly or with enthusiasm. And you're going to perform this story to us, your peers, and also me, as you would to a group of gathered friends. So, intimately, conversationally. And the idea is that you're supposed to know it by heart. And that doesn't mean you should write it out and memorize it. It means you want to know the story from your own life and have the outline of the main beats you're going to hit, and then just try to tell the story for the performance extemporaneously. Try to tell it as if you were telling it to a group of friends off the top of your head, as if you were telling it, for instance, at a party. So that's what you want to think about as being the catalyst behind this performance. You're going to take a moment in your life in which you were performing, and you're going to tell us about that moment in a 2 to 3 minute narrative with a clear beginning, middle, and end. So, in doing so, what we want you to explore is first, why was this moment of performance important to you? That should be something that your performance of the narrative conveys to your audience. You want to consider what's happening in the story, where and with whom it happens, who's doing what actions, and why, like what the motivations of characters are, both in the story and in your act of telling it. So, what that means then is what is important in your narrative, and actions that take place in your narrative that are significant should be clearly communicated as such through your performance of or through your telling of the story. So, there's an introductory exercise for you to do here in mapping out how you're going to construct your narrative. So this is based on a Burkean concept called the pentad, which some of you have, if you've taken Comm160, for instance, have definitely been familiar with or been acquainted with before. But here we're just using it as an analogy. So don't worry about the Burkean part of it too much. The idea here is that when you think about your story, you want to think about these 5 elements of your narrative, and you want to be able to clearly identify what they are. So, what happens in the story? The act. The scene, which is where and when the story takes place. The agent, which is who is doing the main acting in the story, who is the main person who is commanding the narrative, who we are supposed to be focused on. The agency, which is how is that person doing the action that occurs in the story? What are the methods through which somebody does it? And the purpose, which is why they are doing it. So, for instance, if you were telling a narrative about you performing at a talent show, the act would be the performance at the talent show. The where and when would be like in your 8th grade auditorium. The agent would be you doing the performing. The agency would be on the stage with a microphone, probably if you were doing a singing performance or whatever you used in your active performance. And then your purpose. Why did you decide to perform at the talent show? Were you trying to impress somebody? Were you trying to make a name for yourself? Why were you doing it, the action in the first place? And the idea is you don't have to be like, this is the act, this is the scene, and please don't do anything so stilted when you're actually performing. But the idea is that if you answer all of these questions, if you get a sense of this information, then you'll have an important, you'll have the information that you need to understand what matters in your story and how to clearly structure it. So that being said, if you look to the bottom of the handout, you'll see that there is a breakdown, a point breakdown of what is expected from the performance. So as we said, the performance needs to be 2 to 3 minutes long. So that shouldn't be too difficult because you're just telling something that happens in your own life. Please try not to go over too much because remember that your peers have to watch all of these, so we need to be mindful of everybody's time. But yeah, so you'll tell a 2 to 3 minute story. 35 points of the 100 points that this assignment is taken out of is going to be dedicated to the performance dynamics, which is you're meant to create the world of the story for us through your words, through the way that you deliver things, through your energy, and through movements. And we'll talk about that in a second. We want you to be yourself, but intensely. You want to be conversational, but provocatively so. So, a good deal of this performance is going to be dedicated to creating that sense of being there, creating the sense of connection and urgency and intensity in you telling this narrative about a time in which you performed. The second element of the performance dynamics is that you're meant to perform two clear moments of physical movement within this speech. So, a full body motion or a bold gesture. Because some of you may opt to record this as an audio file instead of as a video, in the recording of your story, you may have to then figure out a way in which to communicate your emotions without breaking the flow of your piece, but in a way that is also clear to your audience if they can't see you. So if you record a video, this obviously won't be a problem. And you can use hand gestures or full body motions, and you can accentuate the telling of your story through those things. If you are doing it through an audio recording, your tone and intensity and vocal style is going to be so much more important. It's going to be really important you're not monotonous so you can capture your audience's interest. But you might think about instead of using instead of using a body movement, using a sound effect, or you might narrate the body movement that you would do in that moment to your audience, but make sure that you do it in a way that is artistically effective. So you could think about, for instance, the way that when people do staged readings of scripts, somebody reads out the blocking and the motion. It's not necessarily true that people are gesturing or using hand gestures or body motions in those circumstances. So you could, as an aside, say, then I would gesture in this way, or then this motion would happen. And just make sure that you're doing it in a way that it tries to amplify the tone of your piece as opposed to detract from it. If you have further questions about that, please feel free to let me know. But the point of everything that I just said is that if you're making a video, you need to have two clear moments of physical movement. If you're making an audio file for your performance, you need to figure out an alternative to that. And that can be narrating your physical movements, or that can be substituting sound effects or something like that. Be creative, but there need to be two clear moments in which you're doing something beyond narrating to evoke a tone or a reaction from your audience. Okay. Then the second expectation is the story quality and clear rehearsal. That is, there needs to be a general map to the story. There needs to be a major arc where there's a beginning, middle, and an end, and you need to be following it. It needs to be clear what your purpose is when you're performing your story. It needs to be obvious from your telling of the story what the main through line is and why you think it is important. So don't just tell us a story without its meaning being evident to us in some way. And you should be making that meaning clear to us through your performance. Don't just tell us why it's meaningful. Try to act it out. Try to put it in not as direct of terms, but it has to be clear why the story mattered from its narrative, from its beginning, its middle, and end. And then finally, so that's worth 50 points, is having that structured narrative, having the good content, and then being clear that you are familiar with the story and are telling a story that matters to you for good reason. And then finally is clarity, commitment, and presence. So here are a few pointers about how you ought to think about being present and in moments of performance where you would be in front of a live audience. So the recommendations here are: take a visibly deep breath before you begin. You could turn backward away from the audience and then turn around. But every time you speak to the audience, you need to make sure you're obviously making clear eye contact. You want to end clearly by making eye contact with your audience before exiting. No apologies, winces. Don't say thank you for listening to my story, y'all, or anything like that. Just be steady in yourself, make eye contact with your audience, and then walk off frame or stop your video, and edit out that last little bit when you're reaching for your mouse. So, in this circumstance, all we're saying is that you need to take your moment of performance seriously, try to exhibit poise and exhibit confidence. You want to be louder than you think you should be when you're telling the story, usually, but definitely check how it sounds when you're testing it out, because you don't want to be distorting your audio file by talking too loudly. So make sure that it sounds okay, but project, be confident, act like you are presenting to an entire room of people, even though you are only presenting to a screen in front of you. It may even be helpful for you for these purposes if you have roommates or family members who would be willing, perform for them, have them videotape you, so you can have real moments of interaction. But in any case, for these things, obviously, if you take an audio recording, I won't be able to gauge your eye contact, or your deep breath beforehand. Probably I might be able to hear it, but likely I won't. So in these circumstances, if you're doing an audio recording, what I will be evaluating you on is the clearness with which you are committed to and present in your moments of performance, and the care that you put into it in those moments. So those are the general criteria. So again, then, just to put it really simply, all you're doing is taking a story from your life when you performed to people, breaking it down into a clear narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And from that, you're going to perform to us in a conversational manner and upload that performance as an audio or video file for us all to watch on Friday. So that is what is expected from you. Again, this handout is under resources on Sakai, so please review it, and let me know if you have any questions. But as far as today goes, then, that's going to about wrap us up. Usually, of course, our audio lectures will be a little bit longer. I probably will very rarely lecture for a full 2 hours, because my expectation is that for some of these lectures you will go back and you will listen to things again. But in any case, you should expect the lectures to be between an hour and a half and 2 hours long, typically, and to cover, as we said, course content that will be mapped out in a Google document that I'll send you a link to tomorrow. So for now, just remember that you do have reading for tomorrow. This is a fast and furious few weeks, so we're going to jump right in. So let me know if you have any questions in the meantime, and I look forward to corresponding with you all more in the very near future. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.